Blitz is defined as a sudden, savage attack. It is indeed all this. The effect is sure. The premise is simple. It's a basic, primal confrontation, man to man. No excuses are offered, none accepted.
Welcome to the latest edition of Longhorn Blitz with horns247.com.
It's like a radio station.
Now, here are your hosts, lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers,
Pure athlete, yeah.
I transcend race, hombre.
Matt Butler,
I don't talk, man. I back it up.
And we are chock full of that, man.
Damn right.
and Jeff Howe.
It's still real to me, damn it.
And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so.
If you're gonna blitz, come strong, but don't come at all.
Coming strong with another edition of Longhorn Blitz with Horns 24/7. I am Jeff Howe, and it is draft week, so we're going to talk NFL draft, but I won't beat you down with predictions and projections. Talk more about how it impacts the Longhorns going forward, because you guys, in these shows we've done, we never really said goodbye to the 2019 season. There were coaching changes and all kinds of different things happening. So we'll get into the draft as it impacts the Longhorns going forward. And coming up this weekend was supposed to be the spring game. Spring game was supposed to take place on Saturday. Clearly, that's not happening. So we'll look at some of the things we would have hoped to have seen had there been a spring game. But without further ado, let me bring in the rest of the team for this adventure. He is the master of the soundboard, the drop machine extraordinaire, Matt Butler. How are you, sir?
Doing pretty well, man. Yourself?
Wonderful. And lifetime Longhorn, 2002 UT All-America, 2002 semifinalist for the Jim Thorpe Award. Fourth-round draft choice of the New York Giants in 2003. Spent his NFL career with the Giants, Lions, Bears, Bucks, Broncos, and a year with the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the CFL. When he was done with football, he got himself back to Austin, Texas, and the 40 acres, where he earned his degree. Whenever he gets that team ring back in, we will make sure he wears it proudly. Nevertheless, he is a card-carrying member of DBU. Number 21 in your program, number one in your hearts, Mr. Rod Babers. Rod, I got a little sidetracked because
I tried to get myself together here, so my apologies.
I took a glance.
It's off screen.
Took a glance over at Rod.
Yeah, you don't need to see this. So,
Rod being Papers
please.
Babers right now, and the filing system going on.
I don't want to show this to the world. No.
So, Rod, I'm sure you've got some NFL draft notes in there.
Oh, that's what I'm getting at. Exactly. See, that's exactly what the notes are.
So,
Yeah.
at
Mental Rolodex.
At this point, I think we can safely assume there are at least going to be 3 Longhorns drafted this weekend.
Oh, no doubt about it.
Devin Duvernay, Brandon Jones, Colin Johnson. The when and where, we obviously don't know. Rod, we got some projections, and this is an article Chip Brown did at Horns 24/7, talking to an NFL scouting director looking at draft projections for the Texas draft hopefuls. And see if any of this jives with kind of what you're thinking. Devin Duvernay, 4th or 5th round projection, even though I think lately it seems like that's bumping up a little bit.
Yeah, well, I've seen them higher. I've seen them as
the
high as
second
the second round. So, I mean, it could go either way, depending on when and how many receiver runs there are in this draft, which is historically deep for wide
Right.
receivers.
And then Colin Johnson and Brandon Jones also 4th or 5th round grades. And then, the 2 guys at the tail end, Malcolm Roach and Zach Shackelford, it seems like they are firmly in the, we'll just call it the 6th, 7th round / priority free agent group, which really, Rod, once you get past the 5th round, I mean, at that point, I know guys want to hear their names called.
Yeah.
But once you get through the 5th round, are some guys almost hoping, man, I kind of hope I don't get drafted, because if you're in the priority free agent mix, you probably got 3, 4, 5 teams you're talking to that are going to have deals for you right when the draft is over, and you're going to have your pick of who you go to at that point.
Yeah, I'm sure the agents at that time are considering that. And for Malcolm Roach, I'm sure there are teams that they probably already, or at least the agent, whoever his agent is, has already spoken to. So you're right. I mean, if you're talking about the guaranteed money, basically it would almost be very similar. There are some undrafted free agents, if they're priority free agents, that do get guaranteed money. Hell,
If they're in demand.
Yeah, Andrew Beck got a lot of guaranteed money for the Patriots. I think the most of any of the Patriots undrafted free agents when they brought him in. So, yeah, you can still get some money attached to it. But, yeah, after the, if you're in the 6th or the 7th round, that's not a lot of guaranteed money. I mean, the guaranteed money almost cuts in half after the 1st round.
Yeah.
That's why Bill Belichick loves 2nd round guys, because he's like, 2nd round, that's probably the same amount of talent. The talent pool is not as deep, but it's still a lot of 1st round talent in the 2nd round, because teams miss so much and miss evaluations, but you get it for half the price.
Yeah.
And that's where like those picks nowadays, like say maybe 15 years ago, somebody you drafted maybe was overvalued by the organization a bit more strictly because you drafted them, but teams these days not as allegiant to it. But you normally do get at least that first contract a little bit more guaranteed years when you're drafted than the undrafted free agent.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that would make you feel better with long-term stability.
If you're looking at the hit rate, though, probably, Rod, I would venture to say 6th, 7th round picks are priority free agents. It probably evens out just in terms of the amount of roster fillers you're going to find. You're probably just going to find as many in the 6th or 7th round as you're going to find with signing an undrafted free agent.
I agree. Some teams are just better at it than others. I think the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots are probably the best at being able to find and develop undrafted free agents. I think Bill Belichick prefers undrafted free agents even over the 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks. And maybe it's a mentality thing. Maybe it's because he knows that nobody else is prioritizing those guys. I think it's 5% of the NFL rosters last year were 7th round picks. Around 8% were 6th round picks. 9.3% 5th round picks. So, I mean, even actually there are more 5th round picks on the rosters last year than 4th round picks, but I think it was 8.9% 4th round picks. Yeah. It's negligible. But for the most part, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, all those are double-digit percentages. 14% of the NFL is 1st round picks. 10% is 2nd and 3rd round picks. 32% of NFL rosters are undrafted free agents. And Bill Belichick and the Seattle Seahawks, and there are a lot of teams, they understand
labor,
that.
Man.
They're penny stocks.
I got the numbers right here.
It's the best cheap labor.
If you look at the salary caps from where it's dispersed via position, the two teams at the defensive line that spend 28th and 29th, it's Seahawks 28th, Patriots on the D-line 27th. So those two are in the bottom 5 and 6 in payroll allocation. One has Puna Ford. The other one could be one that might be drafting a guy like a Malcolm Roach, but where you get that lower level, you get high level production, you get a starting D lineman in the NFL, but you're paying at the lowest rate that you can at something like an undrafted free agent or a 5th round or a 6th round. And when both those teams, when you said that, and I just looked at this last night,
it's crazy.
I was like, it's exactly what you're saying is looking at where else do the Seahawks rank in the bottom half on defense? Overall defense, 32nd in payroll allocation. DBs, 29th.
Yeah.
And that's 29th in
They find
DBs.
cheap labor. Hell, Richard Sherman was, a 5th round pick for them?
And
they find cheap labor.
And
but
then
Cam Chancellor was undrafted,
They replace them. So you got D-line 28th,
That's smart,
29th in the secondary.
And by the way, Schneider's traded down, I believe, every year out of the 1st round pick since 2012. So trading down to get more value. Talking about value, the Patriots have had an undrafted rookie free agent make their roster for 15 consecutive seasons. Value, baby. Value is what the draft is about. Don't get caught up in the names and the 40 times and all that. Just think about value.
And to your point also, when we were talking about just the Patriots, you look at them at 27th on the D-line, 24th in linebackers, but all their money spent in the DBs.
Secondary.
2nd in corners and 6th in the secondary. So front 7, though, you have them ranked overall 28th and 24th in the league. That's crazy.
Right, I want to
get That's good.
I want to get your thoughts on this. Craig and I had Malcolm Roach on Light the Tower on Wednesday.
Speaking of value.
And
D-line.
We asked him, said, hey, kind of what are your plans this weekend? Because some guys, social distancing right now, you can't really throw a draft party. But he said, he might watch the 1st round with his brother, might pay attention to it, but really maybe into day 2 he'll take a peek, but day 3 he knows that's probably when he really needs to pay attention. And but what's interesting is he said he and his agent, they're already preparing for the worst. So like you said, is accurate with him. His agent has already talked to teams like, hey, if you don't get drafted, here's a few options that are going to be on the table for teams that are really interested in signing you. So
smart move.
Yeah, but Rod, not all guys prepare that way though. So a lot of guys don't have that kind of plan. They're, shocked when they don't get drafted. It's like, well, were you really expecting to get picked? But I just think it's and Malcolm Dowd was a college coach, so at least is familiar with that process too. So, but let's go from this standpoint, Rod. When you look at these 5 guys, and Parker Braun, I think, is a guy that I want to say get into a camp, but we don't know what the OTA structure at this point is going to look like, or the rookie mini camps. We don't know what any of that stuff is going to look like right now. So let's just take these 5 guys, right? Colin Johnson, Devin Duvernay, Brandon Jones, Malcolm Roach, Zach Shackelford. How many of these guys do you think let's even say practice squad guys next year. Are all 5 of them, 4 or 5, 3 or 5? How many of those 5 guys do you think are at least practice squad players next year?
Practice squad or make a roster?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I think 1, 2, 3. Oh man, I say 3 out of the 5 make a roster, or I would like to say 4 because I want to say Malcolm Roach can be on a practice squad for somebody because he's a project and he's so athletic overall that somebody's gonna bring him on and say, man, I'm gonna give him a couple of years to see what his NFL body looks like. You know what I mean? And his football acumen, they could fall in love with him. So I'd say 3.5. I'll go 3.5.
3.5.
I heard your interview with Craig when
I'll
we
go
were
3.5.
talking to Malcolm when I was driving up here, and he is sort of as if Malcolm talked about manufacturing depth within himself and being asked, like, what position do you want to play on the D-line? And he was like, well, feel like I'm a guy that can play multiple positions and can bring value to. You got to have 52-man roster, but I can be somebody that backs up these handful of positions, and that's exactly that niche and role that he can have and be valued so much.
Did he use that term value? Did he use the term value?
I don't remember the exact words.
I would love to see if he.
I think he did.
That'd be great if he did, because that would mean that somebody else talking to him like, man.
When I heard it, I was like, man, he's been listening to us.
He's listening to us,
the same way we do.
But this is the guy that played middle linebacker at Texas. Great. He only did it for 1 game, but he played. He's got middle linebacker film.
Man, it's unbelievable that he ran a 4.8.
4.84.
He does sort of have just like
at 297 pounds.
Yeah.
Goodness, that's crazy.
When you
somebody in the NFL that loves freaks, he's basically kind of in the freakish realm, and also the possibility that he can play multiple positions. I think he is going to get drafted late. I think somebody's going to roll the dice on him as a 7th rounder or something. Like you said, probably won't be to his benefit either, because it won't be a team that he can't choose because he can choose his situation, but it could be a random team that just likes, to collect freaks, not the team that in terms of circumstance, scheme, and situation that fit him best.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that's, I think, the point that needs to be driven home with Malcolm Roach and Zach Shackelford, because I think Shackelford, just by virtue of the position he plays, right? You need centers to get you through camp. You need centers to get you through OTAs. And I'm not knocking Zach Shackelford's NFL potential, but that's his foot in the door. It's like, hey, this guy can play center. Great, bring him in, because it's
rare.
If one of ours gets hurt, you need one. And if they decide that maybe he's a practice squad guy or somebody they would carry, I mean, hey, you're talking about late round pick, undrafted free agent. That goes back to the cheap labor conversation we had. But I want to look at how this impacts Texas going forward. And we know they had winter conditioning, but no spring practice. Spring game was supposed to be this weekend. So the process of replacing these guys, right? Let's start with Devin Duvernay, because that to me is the easiest one out of all of these. Tom Herman has a plan on how to get Jordan Whittington and Jake Smith the football. Like we talked about on this show. He talked about it on our Texas Tailgate chat. Those guys, he's called them ideal fits. I forgot if that was the word he used. I'm paraphrasing here. I'm doing this on the fly. But basically, ideal prototype.
That's what he did. I think he did, yeah.
Prototype fits for that H position, that slot position, that hybrid position in this pro spread offense. So, Rod, that's probably the easiest kind of plug and play that you've got on this roster when you look at how do you replace Duvernay. Okay, you get Jordan Whittington and Jake Smith involved in the offense. That's exactly how you do that.
Yeah, no, that's going to be, to me, you could argue it's going to be the key to the offense this year. It's going to promote versatility. I love Mike Yurcich's kind of offensive philosophy. I always say he's going to do the cover version of Tom Herman's pro spread. You know what I mean? There are great songs out there that often can transcend through different decades because people do really good different cover versions of it. Sometimes you don't even realize that the cover version was copied from some other artist back in the day. You know what I mean? It's like Whitney Houston's "I'll Always Love You." You know what I mean? That's not Whitney's cover version, but it was just that damn good. We're hoping that Mike Yurcich's cover version of the pro spread offense will be just that good. We'll forget all about Tom Herman's original pro spread idea because the Yurcich interpretation of it will be that good. And I think the key to that is kind of unlocking the creativity will be Jordan Whittington and Jake Smith and how they use those guys. And he said players, plays, and formations. Those are his 3 keys. That's what he builds his different concepts around. Well, those 2 guys can affect the formations and they can affect the plays from down to down. They make you multiple. So I think that Tom Herman, there's a reason that he said he's been using that position and weaponizing that position since he got here. Lil Jordan Humphrey, then Devin Duvernay. Now he's got the two guys that he has envisioned and visualized to play that position. Probably two of the best in the country if they could do it. I heard Percy Harvin's trying to come back to the NFL. Basically, these are two Percy Harvins. You got two of them.
This is going to sound asinine, what I'm about to say, okay? Considering the year Devin Duvernay had. It's one of the greatest statistical years in the history of this program for a wide receiver.
Yep.
But are you upgrading at the slot position?
I don't know about upgrade, but it could be.
That's a great question.
If we're talking about for next year, or for just say that.
However you want to.
I wouldn't say an upgrade, but I like the versatility because you have multiple guys that can switch in and do it.
They didn't use Duvernay enough though.
There was no versatility last year too.
But Duvernay could have. They could have.
He could have been, but
they didn't do it enough.
But I don't know if that's fair to use against Duvernay as say exactly.
No, but that's not exactly. That's not his fault.
Will we get more production? We may actually get more production out of it too.
See, I'm more in line with Matt on this in terms of production. Rod, I think from your standpoint, it's much more of a fault of the staff now. Now that you're saying these guys are prototype guys, is exactly what you want at the age. Now there is no excuse for what you're talking about, which is did you, as good as Duvernay was, did you get enough out of him? Did you exhaust every way to get him the football? There's no excuse for that now. You can't sit here. We can't sit here maybe at this time next year we're playing games. I don't know. But whenever the coming season, whenever it happens, whenever it ends, it would be almost malpractice on the part of the offensive staff if we're sitting around saying, man, I wish they would have got Jake Smith more involved in this way. I wish they should have done more Jordan Whittington this way. Now, granted, injuries could change that and circumstances could change that. But with what you're saying, I think now you basically alleviate that safety net. There is no safety net for failure now. You've got these two guys. Go do what you do.
Man, that's a great question about the upgrade. It's just because it's there. I don't know if I can answer the question. I guess it's a cop-out, but they're just more ideal for the position probably than Duvernay or Lil Jordan Humphrey, even though we all agree Lil Jordan Humphrey and Devin Duvernay were underutilized.
Yes.
They probably could have used those guys in different ways and more creative ways. They didn't do it enough. But he'll be able to better weaponize Jake Smith and Jordan Whittington because these are these are the prototypes that he's always visualized. Right. He's envisioned for his offense.
Because that position's always got the production in his offense. But when you look at this, the situation may be best for them being that they're a fit, and then the offense may not funnel down in because not only was Duvernay your best option, but he had the best chemistry with your quarterback and then was the most trusted. So a lot of stuff was not necessarily forced for a wrong reason. It was because it was the best play. But the top side of the offense was limited because you basically didn't weaponize all aspects of the offense, and it basically got the idea of a switch in the NBA, and you can simplify the Warriors down to Durant in a one-on-one situation if you get the switch and be like, okay, well, you'll take away everything that was the great offense that was the Warriors because this is a better one-on-one and we can become reliant upon it, and then at times it can actually limit your creativity and make you not be as good of an overall team as a unit of 5 or 11. And that's sort of the situation where it's always that constant battle of, well, you want to funnel it to your guys. You want to make sure that you're, not tell Sam to spread the ball around for no reason other than, well, if Duvernay's open, it's open, but it's going to be easier to defend.
The other part of that offense, Rod, when you look at these 5 guys and replacing them, I think the other one that's easy to go to is center, with Derek Kerstetter taking over for Zach Shackelford. And again, it's no knock on Shackelford. That was 2-time first team All Big 12 guy, but I don't know that you'll miss his leadership. I think is really what you'll miss from Zach Shackelford, like a senior center, 4-year starter. That intangible stuff, you don't replace that. Rod, you've been on teams. You don't not to compare him vis-a-vis to this guy, but the intangible stuff, you don't replace that when you lose a Casey Hampton. No. Or an Aaron Humphrey.
And the acquired skill like being that long.
Or your group on the back end, you had guys. I'll tell you a good comparison for Zach Shackelford. Right? I'll give you this. And Rod, this relates to when you played. Physically, you had guys that could bring to the table more than what Ahmad Brooks brought, right? They're more physically gifted. But that intangible stuff that Brooks brought to the table of why Coach Aquino liked him so much at, sorry, Brooks, 5'8" or whatever Brooks is, 5'7", whatever he is. That intangible stuff, you weren't going to replace that.
No, I agree. I mean, there's certain guys that, in terms of the chemistry with the team, they provide balance. You know what I mean? Whether it be their policing in the locker room or whether they're just they're the comedians on the team. I mean, I can't tell you, every guy's got their own personality, but it's very, very unique when you get one of those guys who's also a leader and that presence is something you can't really quantify. And you don't really replace it, but you got guys who've learned as much as they can from those guys. Like me, I mean, I learned as much as I could from Brooks. I learned a ton from Casey Hampton. You replace Casey Hampton, but I learned a ton from his leadership style, the leadership style of guys like D.D. Lewis. I mean, I can name some great leaders, and Kwame Cavill was a great leader for us. And you don't replace that, but hopefully the younger guys are watching, they're learning, and they figure out, all right, these are the things. These are the ways that I can lead in different situations, and this is how I need to lead and set the example. So that's kind of what I did. I mean, I'm sure I left off some great leaders too.
No, the point is, you led me to where I wanted to go with.
So I can be like that for the Casey Studdards and the VYs and the Huff Daddies and the Cedric Griffins. You know what I mean?
While Derek Kerstetter, I think, is in terms of a skill set, in terms of physical talent, I actually think is an upgrade over Shackelford.
Could be.
You hope some of that leadership stuff rubbed off on him, and that
Same with Smith off of Duvernay. Same idea.
But I think with that offensive line though, at that position at center, man, you gotta be that.
They just
dude.
align.
I mean, you've got to be. We've heard Casey Studdard and Justin Blaylock talk over the years. Like, yeah, they were talented, but Lyle Sinline was the glue that held that group together.
Yeah, exactly. And you never know. Yeah, exactly.
And we saw, even go back to Charlie's first year. Like, I think we thought that offense would be okay, but even losing David Asher, like, well, okay, that's bad. But man, when they lost Dom Espinosa, it's like, man, it's just, can you just hit the reset button on this thing? Like, like your offensive line is just like, you don't replace the stuff that a multiple-year starter at center. Like, it's hard to replace that.
Well, because, like I said, the chemistry is so delicate. You know what I mean? Like you said, you remove any of those elements from that whatever that chemical compound is, and it's a different chemical altogether.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the chemistry in that locker room. You remove one guy, and I know it's fragile. You're like, oh, man, what do you mean a Brooks? You look at Brooks, he wasn't that talented. You can replace one of those younger guys, put him in there, and they'll be good. It's like, no, not a young Huff Daddy is different from the Huff Daddy his junior year. You know what I mean? It's a different, and even though, he doesn't have the talent, but the experience and the presence, like all those things matter once you're a veteran guy and you're embracing that leadership. I mean, Brooks is a guy that had been through it. He had been benched at one position, lost his job, then went to another position where they tried to throw him away, and then ended up impressing the new coach enough where he's like, I got to start this guy. When they didn't really want to start him.
Wasn't even the guy he recruited.
You know what I mean? And so, so it was one of those things where I remember his presence. D.D. Lewis was another guy like that. So I'm with you. It's very, like you said, that offensive line, more than any other position group, we all agree they have to work in cohesion. You know what I mean?
Continuity is more important for that group than any other. Continuity, chemistry, whatever word you want to put on it. It's more important for that group than any other group on the roster.
Yeah.
By far.
Yeah. And they don't have an offseason.
It's basically half your
offense. They don't have an offseason to brew it.
Yeah. Which is why, I mean, at least you've got, which is why I think probably the move is get Junior Angulau to left guard. That way you at least go from left tackle to center with guys that have played together.
Yeah.
Right, with Cosme, Angulau, and Derek Kerstetter. Going over to defense, Rod, and Malcolm brought this up. Matt, you said you listened to the interview, so I don't know if you caught this part, but I didn't. I know he, had the comments about playing in the Todd Orlando defense and the 4-eye and the things he was asked to do. We didn't get into that kind of nitty-gritty of it, but I just asked him what he felt the scheme change was going to do to the current defensive lineman on campus, and he thinks it's going to unlock him. And the three guys that he mentioned, Taquan Graham, Keandre Coburn, Marquez Bimage, and I trust Malcolm Roach. I don't, I know he's probably not going to give you, anything that he doesn't want out there in terms of what he says for a quote, but a guy that conceptually understands football, has been around the game his whole life, so I'll trust him when he's talking about personnel and scheme.
He doesn't BS football.
But he said BS that. But he said the reason why he likes those three guys, he's like, not only are those guys really good rushers and disruptors who can get up the field, he's like, they're all 3 high motor guys. He's like, if you put those guys in the right shade and just let them go be disruptive, he's like, the production's going to be infinitely better than it was when guys are just having to catch blocks and read things and do things that they were doing in that 3-man front. So, Rod, I mean, they're, again, kind of like with the offensive line, that intangible stuff with Malcolm Roach, it's up to Keandre Coburn and Joseph Osai and Taquan Graham to bring up that leadership. But I think just with the numbers you got, with the scheme change, with the talent that we think is there, I tend to think that D-line is going to be all right.
No, I think the D-line could end up becoming a strength because essentially, I mean, in the equation now with the jack position, the jack. Don't you add Joseph Osai essentially to the front in that hybrid role of the jack?
You're basically
depending on he's basically added to the front 4, but depending on the situation. I even heard Chris Ash talking. He said he's going to be in coverage less. He's going to be in coverage less. Like, I like that. I like that. He's going to be. It means he's going to be run stuffing and pass rushing. So I'm with you, man. With Keandre Coburn, who I love. Taquan Graham, who last year I thought actually had a really, really solid year, like on the down low, really.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't give him a lot of props for it. And then you start talking about some of the other guys. You got Tavondre Sweat and Moro Ojimo. Some guys you really forget about in terms of the depth on that.
And Roach said all those names. He literally went through those exact ones.
He's a coach.
About. Yeah, he knows what he's talking
young
about.
guys like Myron Warren and Daniel Carson we haven't even seen yet.
Talked about that. Yeah. No, I think that defensive line is going to be a strength, and I'm not worried about that group really. Even though Malcolm Roach, I don't think it's easy to replace guys like Malcolm Roach because he's one of those guys. Like I think there are a ton of guys who are probably better. Maybe not a ton of guys. I take that back. Maybe a couple of guys who are now like better overall linemen right now than Malcolm Roach if you just evaluate him as a defensive lineman. Mm-hmm. But the fact that he can play multiple positions, the fact that he's been through so much as a player, considering all the regime changes and the coaching changes, I mean, it's going to be hard to replace his presence.
Goes back to that intangible stuff. Like right now, in the room we're sitting in, if Taquan Graham and Malcolm Roach walk through that door together, and I said, Rod, pick me out a defensive lineman to start your day. You're picking Taquan Graham 6 days a week and twice on Sunday.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And it's just, but he's willing. He's so coachable.
Yeah.
They told him what he needed to do at the combine. He's like, man, you need to gain some weight. We don't know what you're going to be. He's like, they're looking at you as maybe a undersized interior D lineman. He's like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
I'll be 297 and run a 484. That's what y'all want me to be. He'll be whatever you want him to be. Just tell him what you want him to be, and he will kind of mold himself to become that. It's really, really interesting.
Well, and I mean, even now we've seen more and more of them be the case, but Texas sort of has a handful of guys. Like I always think of Lamar Houston was the guy that reminded me of Malcolm and just the way that he was able to be malleable to the situation and fit the defense where he want. But since then, it's made me just realize the NFL valuing and how they have used different guys that we've seen, from your Sam Machos to your Okafors and there's a handful of them that play anywhere from like at a different team. One will be outside linebacker, but then he will play D-line as a backup. And it's the same idea with Roach, but there's actually a handful of them that we've seen Texas acquire. And it's, I think, sort of just goes back to the idea that finding value at Texas and knowing that they're good athletes and knowing that maybe they weren't put in the best situation, but then they still have the tape. And it's like, well, you know, we know that this piece can help here or here, and it's worth at least inviting into the camp to see which ones fits. I mean, that's how it takes back to the O-line conversation, but how Lyle Sinline ended up playing in a Super Bowl within like a couple years of leaving Texas and being able to just be there and fill up as a practice squad guy, but one injury, 1 week, and he was a decade for being the center for the Cardinals.
I think the San Francisco 49ers used 2 centers this year, multiple centers.
There you go.
You know, staying on the defense route, when you look at replacing guys, replacing Brandon Jones, and it bears repeating, like all 5 of the guys that have a chance to get drafted, they were all captains, leadership council guys. So the intangible stuff, they're going to check a lot of that boxes in the interview process. They should have checked a lot of boxes in that interview process. But where you are with D-line, that's kind of where I'm at with the secondary. Like, you're going to miss Brandon Jones, but you get, which by the way, have you seen what Chris Ash is going to call the nickel position?
No, what is it?
They're going to call it the spur.
Okay, the spur, I like that.
Yeah.
All right.
Spur
and a jack.
So Chris Adamora and Anthony Cook are going to get a shot to work at the spur position whenever football
sounds
activities.
like the 1840s.
Chris Adamora and Anthony Cook?
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll get a shot there. I love Adamora and the nickel, by the way. But that goes back to the point. Like Brandon Jones, Brandon Jones is another one of those guys. Hey, you want me to go play nickel? I'll go play nickel. You want me to play over the top? I'll play over the top.
NFL loves those guys.
Be a box safety. I'll be a box safety.
And he already told every team what he'll do.
And I think the good thing with Brandon Jones, go back to his freshman year, Rod, guy was probably the best special teams player in the program. In fact, he blocks 2 punts two of his first 3 games. So
when he came in, it was like he was like the star playing. Like it was before, and then Stearns or somebody like him sort of overshadowed him, but he was that 1 year before.
Not that he's going to be a factor in the return game at the next level, but at least he's done it.
How many ways can you make a football team?
Playmaker.
That's what it's about. Yeah, it's like what Bill Parcells used to say to players before they went on the field. How many plays I'm gonna get from you today? How many plays? All right, I need to know. Special teams, defense, how many plays? And Brandon Jones, one of those guys, you look up at the end of the day, he might end up giving you 10 plays on defense, end up playing special teams, maybe 15 plays. You might get 25, 30 plays out of Brandon Jones. It's just a guy who's just building depth on your depth chart.
And he was a fun guy. I remember as a freshman, like you talked about him on special teams and how dominant he was. And Texas has had certain guys like that. Like I remember Michael Griffin was sort of a immediate special teams freak when he came in. Even Sergio Kendall, I rewatched a couple games. It was like the 07 season was on randomly. And I mean, you have Sergio Kendall running down on kickoffs like a madman. But like it's like, yeah, you're a top end player, but you haven't had the opportunity, but that's where you can literally put a few plays on film that'll stand out for a lifetime.
That 07 team. Mac Brown hated that team. Talk about how he hated that team.
Yeah.
I love
Oh,
Mitchell.
my God. If y'all watch back
It's
in
relative. It's like saying you hate one of your kids.
He goes ballistic in that Oklahoma State game. I just watched that Okie State game from that season and the Nebraska one where Jamal went insane. And one of the best Mac ballistic moments in 07 is in that Okie State game.
I love mentioning that, Rod, because the next thing I always say after that, if he only knew what was to come in 2010 and thereafter.
He won 10 games.
That 07 team is not looking too bad now.
They won 10 games. It's amazing what used to be defined as an underachieving team back in the day.
Oh, yeah. It was absurd. And when you talk about, like we were talking the O-line earlier and having to replace a guy like Shackelford and how one piece can sort of change the chemistry. And, like, we sort of learned that real quick from that wave of Texas to the next one where in 1 year, just one bad O-line can be the whole thing that affects your entire team offensively and defensively because it's going to allow the other team to get turnovers or to get good field position and all these things that you don't really weigh the same way. And when you talked about the units and why the O-line's so important, it's the only thing basically the football goes with the O-line. It doesn't matter if it's a pass or a run play. So in theory, you have 6 players invested. If you have a bad O-line, that's more than half of your offense because the O-line in the football is not going to be doing anything if you can't get that push up front to where that just is sort of a way to quantify what you were saying about it being a unit so much more valuable than anything else.
Which if you're in a debate with somebody about who's the best quarterback in school history, if you want to make an argument for Colt McCoy, that's your argument. That's your argument because Vince Young, as great as he was, played behind maybe the best O-line in school history.
Yep.
When you think about it. And Colt McCoy's offensive line, average?
Dude, rewatching
below average?
Might be below average.
Rewatching that 07 Nebraska game, he gets obliterated. He's concussed, and he had already been knocked out of the K-State game with a mild concussion in 07. Came back in the game after a mild concussion. Then against Nebraska Sue's ragdolling him as a sophomore in that game. And I didn't realize how bad that O-line was in 07 until I watched some of those games, and Jamal just bails him out.
Go back to that game, Matt, which you said you watched, right?
Mm-hmm, both of them.
They had to go to the Q package and put John Childs at a quarterback. It's like we need somebody with some mobility, somebody that can do something because you can't block anybody from him.
He was getting hit so hard in that game, it was nuts.
But that's your argument for Colt McCoy. That's how. But Rod, going back to Brandon Jones,
Flashbacks right
masked it for 07, 08, 09. He
Yeah.
masked a bad O-line.
Going back to Brandon Jones. Yeah, Jamal Charles was a 1,600-yard back behind that line. Like that should have been a clue. Take this guy earlier in the third round. Like this.
Yeah.
It's all right. About draft value, you got Jamal Charles like the 91st pick in the damn draft.
216 yards in the fourth quarter.
But Roger, you talk about replacing Brandon Jones, and we talk about depth at positions. And think about this with the safety room, right? You lose Brandon Jones. DeMarvion Overshown's already moved the linebacker. We're pretty sure Tyler Owens is at least going to get a look there at some point, depending on what happens when everything gets back to normal. Chris Adamore going to the nickel. So, wow, that's 3 or 4 bodies, right?
Yep.
Still got Caden Stearns.
Yeah.
You still got Chris Brown. You're going to get B.J. Foster back from shoulder surgery.
deep,
Montrell still got some experience last year. And the two young kids, Xavier Alford and Jaron Thompson, I think they actually fit the safety mold that Chris Ash wants in his defense going forward. That's one position I think in recruiting you're going to see take a shift where Todd Orlando liked the bigger safeties, guys that were 6'2", could get up to like 215, 220. I think Chris Ash would rather have a guy who's 5'11", 6 foot that can play at like 195, 200, 205.
Yeah.
Maybe
Brown types.
I think when you look back at Ohio State, I think probably like what Von Bell was at Ohio State. I think if Chris Ash every cycle could recruit him like 2 or 3 Von Bells, wouldn't that be nice? 2 or 3 Von Bells at safety. I think that's what he would do.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty in the Big 12. That matches up actually too.
All right. So if we're talking about the guys that are toughest to replace, right? We've already talked about replacing Zach Shackelford, Devin Duvernay, Malcolm Roach, Brandon Jones. I think those transitions, just from a pure football standpoint, it's not going to be that difficult. The difficult one, and depending on what the offense looks like, we're expecting a more expanded route tree. And the difficult one is Colin Johnson, because you just don't – to get a guy 6'6" that has those kind of high point ball skills, he's a unicorn in that sense. Like, you just don't find those guys every year. They don't come into your program. So that X receiver position, it's not a situation where, okay, like – I don't want to go down this road again, Rod, because I don't need us going at each other's throats. We got to keep social distance anyway. Like, it's not like you're going to take Malcolm Epps and put him at X receiver. Like, well, he's 6'7" and high point the ball. Let's just have him replace Colin Johnson. No, you're going to make that position a little bit different if you move Brennan Eagles over there, or if you work Marcus Washington there. You're just going to make, and probably you're not replacing Colin Johnson with a player per se. You're replacing him with a body that can work well with an expanded route tree.
Yeah, I assumed at the point of the position, it ends up being a big, tall guys because they want someone that can win one-on-ones on the outside, and that person can find a way to can have gravity, right? You want to be able to have gravity where you can attract other defenders towards you.
Right.
And that's what Colin Johnson had a lot of. He had great gravity, even when he wasn't necessarily getting the target, or he wasn't necessarily the focal point of the play. Still, he would attract defenders in his vicinity because everybody knows at 6'6", if the ball is placed in the right spot and that defensive back and Colin Johnson are even, it's Colin Johnson's advantage. That 50-50 just turned into a 70-30.
Yeah.
Just right there. You know what I mean? That's how dangerous he is. So Brandon Eagles would have to do it another way. Duvernay could do it with his speed and different things. Duvernay's just a freak. But you got to have a different way of doing it. So, I think Brandon Eagles is a speed guy. I've not seen him being able to kind of debo people for the football.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's his strength. But maybe it is. We just haven't seen him do that with a more complex route tree.
But I like Brendan Eagles flash like the way – flash on and taking the arc, I should say, that you want a young playmaking receiver to take. Like, the consistency's not there, but there's enough of the, oh, wow, he just did that. Like, he just went over the top of Christian Fulton for a ball and took it to the house. Like, or the couple catches he made in the Iowa State game. It's like, wow, okay, he can do that. And you're not going to get that every play, but at least, Rod, he's on that kind of arc where you're like, okay,
He can stretch the field.
I see it. Now can he just go put it together?
Well, and that's where, like, the second half of the year, it seemed, you talked about those examples. That was the time whenever there were a few times where he actually stood out against the opponent, and you saw him flashing downfield, which was something that you never saw prior to that. Even, like, it needed to be schemed open for him to be open. He was the guy on the backside of the play getting the one-on-one and being able to. Yeah. So, like, those are advantageous situations that he hadn't been winning for the first year and a half. But then by the end of the year, or maybe against inferior opponents, he's able to do that. And if you're at Texas, that's the baseline you need to have. If you're going to be on the field, you need to beat people if you're in that one-on-one, if you feel like you have anything to par or you're better than they are.
Iowa State's the game, Matt. I think that, when you talk about that stretch he had late, LSU and Oklahoma State were early, but that Iowa State game, right, where he makes that touchdown catch right before the half, and it's like, oh, wow, that was a great effort, but it's out of bounds. And you watch the replay, oh no, he scored.
Yeah.
He's in.
That's a Colin Johnson type thing, because that was like the ballerina footwork that you see from a 6'6", gangly guy, like a guy like Colin Johnson. Those are those skills that what made him step out when we were a freshman. You're like, oh, we haven't had a guy like that. And then because of just circumstances, situations, changes, it wasn't fully maximized. So then now when you're left with somebody that's lesser of those, say, length or the pedigree or like just jump off the page or jump off the screen, insane footwork along the sideline. It's like you haven't even got those opportunities yet for a guy like Eagles because you've had people ahead of him that are actually quality. So that's a good time where he has that opportunity now to see if he is one of those guys or if he just goes around with the pack.
Yeah, and Marcus Washington's a guy that I keep hearing so much about behind the scenes. Like anybody you talk to, they gush about Marcus Washington.
Good.
That's good. They need somebody. Yeah, they're going to need somebody to step up. We just don't know who it is at wide receiver.
At that outside receiver. Yeah. Like, when you talk about Marcus Washington, like, if we talked about this on this podcast, we might have talked about it last week. I don't remember, but, like, the Texas – yeah, we did. We talked about the Texas Tech game. When did we talk about it, Matt?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When
Marcus Washington.
I said audibly in the press box, like, wow, John Burt's been getting those reps all year, huh? No disrespect to John Burt.
But that's where you want to have Yurcich's offense this year because we've actually seen Herman gets production out of the passing game, but it's funneled through the same position. And we have not seen outside receivers be successful at Texas in the Tom Herman era. Even a lesser version of Duvernay was that guy. So now maybe if you have the new.
It's because the routes are so predictable on the outside. The only variation they do have in the route tree comes from the H position now. It comes from the slot, so there's a lot more space that's created naturally from the alignment. But, man, what we talked about over and over again, you can expect there are 3 or 4 routes they're running on the outside consistently, and they don't run anything else really other than that. So I think with Yurcich, he'll come up with more creative route concepts to force the DBs to have to defend more routes. Therefore, ironically, you're going to open up the same base routes, the curl, the hitch, and the slant. All of that will come open because now I do have to defend the 6 route. I got to defend the post corner, or I do have to defend the post route. They run a variety of different things on the outside. I can tell you right now, it's like 4 routes you got to defend on the outside.
Well,
it's like 4. As a DB, I'm like, I can check him off the list for you. Boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean?
You said it perfectly. They're talking about the creativity needed within the offense to get those routes open because whenever you talk to, say, probably Herman, I would guess he'd say, well, those guys are in roles trying to spread the defense and stretch the gravity. But it's like, yes, but if you're that predictable within it, there are only a few possibilities within those 3 or 4 variations. So that's where a new mind being creative, being able to use the same type of pieces, but in other ways to still stretch the defense, not only physically, but mentally on where they should be. And then that can actually be the gravity you speak of because of the confusion that your offense can cause.
Here's what I liked about the pro spread offense. And it was what I still like about it, Rod, in terms of the receiver position. For so long, and I use this example that a guy, and I'll retell the story, so if you've heard me tell it before, just fast forward about 15 seconds.
Or listen again.
Or listen again. Thank you, Matt. Talk to a guy on Mac Brown's staff that told me the problem they had in wide receiver recruiting kind of post-national championship is they got so obsessed trying to find the next lineman Swede that all they ended up with was a bunch of tall guys who could run that weren't really good.
Yeah.
Lacking original thought.
Yeah.
If you're trying to find somebody to replace the next guy, it's why the NBA look for the next MJ, and there's never going to be one for a decade. Like, it's impossible to do that.
And, we saw Texas. It wasn't the problem that they couldn't recruit talent. Look at the recruiting rankings. Like, there's a reason, like, Texas has top 10 class in their Mac Brown, even when things weren't going well. Hell, the 2012 class that got a really high bust rate that we were talking about, I think it's like 38% bust rate. Like, they were number 2 class in the country. Maybe that was the 10 class. I don't remember. But anyway, the problem was you're acquiring this talent, but you have no clue on how to build a team because your offense changes year to year.
Yeah.
And when you're changing coordinators and you're changing philosophy, the parts might not fit the system.
No.
What the pro spread has done is it's given Tom Herman an offense to say, no, this is what I want in my X receiver. And I want my Z receiver to profile kind of like this. And I want the H to look kind of like this. So now you're recruiting to an offense where you say, okay, these guys, the parts are going to fit the role. Like, you're not putting square pegs in a round hole. And then we talked about how adaptable they've been with that H position. But the point is, like, okay, if I know how this position needs to function in this offense, I know what I need to go get in recruiting.
Yeah.
It makes the recruiting process much more streamlined.
Agreed.
You're not just acquiring talent. At that point, you're building a team. With that said, to your point about Mike Yurcich, Rod, now it's time to take that blueprint, that framework, and say, okay, this is what it's been. This is a good plan. You've done well with this.
But now everybody knows.
Now you got to evolve it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
The tape's there already. So, like, if you have those compartmentalized roles and positions and you've been public about that, you're basically just giving the blueprint to the opponent that then can quickly be able to do what they want to defend you. That's where the new mind, new ideas with the same pieces can be something where get inventive, get creative, don't just try to duplicate something.
I think Tom Herman, I think he's strange. Not strange, just unique. He needs a muse. He needs something to inspire him. He needs a player usually to inspire him. That's what the age position, I think, works well with him because it changes from year to year, and he can kind of adapt the role to the player that he's using in that position, right? Low Jordan Humphrey, the age looked a little bit different than it did with Duvernay. Duvernay, 60% of his targets within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. Low Jordan Humphrey went downfield a little bit more, right? And now I think it's going to look a little bit different, but now it'll be Yurcich, the one interpreting it. And I think Tom Herman, part of the weakness there is if you need a muse, you need a player to inspire you to change the offense. I think Greg Davis had some of that in him. Greg Davis was brilliant at that. Like he would look at a quarterback and go, okay, I'm going to build this offense around you. He would be inspired by that. And I think you want some of that, but you don't want to be disabled by it, essentially. And I think for Tom Herman, he was almost disabled by it. He needed him. That's why he was so excited about Jordan Whittington. Think about how much he pumped up Jordan Whittington. It's like, dude, I haven't seen him on a football field in college. I mean, yes, great in high school. He was unbelievable. But they talked about like he already was first team all Big 12. You're like, man, that's a lot of hype. And it was more hype than Jake Smith or anybody else.
It was like that spring game with him.
The reason he was so hyped is because he was so excited about being creative. It was inspiring creativity because he was watching him going, we can do this. Oh, we can run 21 personnel, turn it into 10 personnel. You know what I mean? And he even talked about that when you guys had him on your virtual chat. So I think he's one of those types of offensive minds. I think Yurcich is different. I think Yurcich is really good at taking someone else's concept, taking someone else's song essentially and making a very good cover version of it. He did it with Gundy, and I think that's why he works really well with others. He doesn't have any pride about running his own offense. I think it's going to help. Now on the outside for Tom Herman though, I think Yurcich's style will work better because he doesn't need a player to build it around. He'll just build in productivity and build in concepts for different players. I think it'll help him out.
Yeah, and I think there was too much, be careful how I say this, I think there was too much Greg Davis influence in the offense last year just in terms of what's that mindset Greg Davis had, Rod, where you talked about the quarterback, but especially early on in his tenure, kind of reminded, the offense the last 2 years really reminded me of Greg Davis, like pretty much that era between Ricky Williams and Vince Young, when you were on campus, right? Like, okay, if I've got all this talent, I'm just going to go out and talent you, right? It doesn't matter what I do. I'm just going to do it better than anybody you've seen do it. And I've got NFL talent at pretty much every position group, so we're just going to go beat your brains in that way.
Yeah.
But the evolution needed to come because when you ran up against an Oklahoma or a Colorado who's on a hot streak or an Oregon who was really good, now it becomes a case of, okay, the talent equals out. What's our advantage? And for so long, Greg Davis had no advantage. They had no counterpunch. And how many times the TCU game is a perfect example, Rod? Like, okay, they're sitting on route concepts. Gary Patterson's not a dummy. Like, he watches film. He knows what you're doing. Mm-hmm. What's your counterpunch? We saw they ran one slot fade, never really went back to it. Like, there wasn't enough of a counterpunch. I think Yurcich, based on what you're saying, looking at his background, the counterpunch is kind of what he's always thinking about, trying to stay one step ahead.
Exactly right.
And it's not that there's a right way or a wrong way to do it, but that's why I keep going back to this. For what Tom Herman needed in an offensive coordinator, I don't think he could have hired a better guy than Mike Yurcich.
I agree with that.
And then you even look at the offense and brought up those games last year when Texas ended up struggling. Now, it came down at times to where you tried to just outpower or out-physical and be that type of team. And if that actually goes wrong, it isn't like scheme where like, okay, well, this scheme isn't working, we can use this other inventive idea. If you're trying to build a principle and then become reliant on, okay, but see, we got to this point program-wise, but then you haven't assessed your talent as well, or you actually can't go out and do what you think, then what are you left with? You're left with much at all, and you end up struggling the way Texas struggled in those situations. So that's why it's great to have a guy like Yurcich or somebody else that can be a checks and balances on not only philosophy, but also in game to see what's working and what isn't working.
Seems like Yurcich is a better self-scouter
There you
I
go.
could be
That's the
wrong
same
about
idea.
that, but yeah, because our problem with Tom Herman often was, listen, everybody can come up with a bad game plan. I can come up with, a bad show, and I thought it was going to be a great show the way I planned it out. Turns out that's not a hot topic. People don't like. It's not interesting. And I got to pivot, and I got to
Find something
freestyle,
else.
and I got to go to something else. And you got to assume at times, like, okay, plan A is not going to work. Let's assume, and I don't know if they sit down in the meetings enough and go, all right, guys, we came up with a great game plan. That's an awesome game plan. What if it doesn't effing work?
And that doesn't mean you're lacking confidence.
No. It's just, what if it doesn't
preparation.
effing work? What are we going to do? What's the adjustment? And why wouldn't it work? What would they do with their personnel that would cause our game plan to be obsolete?
Yep.
And then how do we pivot? Where do we pivot? That should be a separate file that we go to the WTF file. What the file, all right? You know what? Go get it. And we've done that. I remember game plans where literally Caldwell Reese would go, all right, game plan, it's up. Okay, scrub it up, throw it out, and we go, we're going man-to-man across the board, pump and run. I'm like, you just gotta simplify it. But, it depends on, you don't know. They got really good coaches over there, too, being paid good money. So you never know they're going to come up with a great game plan. And maybe they find that weakness that you didn't even know you had. And you go, oh, damn, we're weak there. And they figured it out. And you got to, you should be self-scouting and knowing what those weaknesses are before they exploit.
And all that Yurcich can complement the situation, and then just the additional set of eyes than you had, say, last year, that even though Beck was with Herman, it was sort of them two within the same frame of one offense, to where just having two set of eyes or another set of offensive eyes can just add value to see things that you just can't blame a head coach from not being able to see if you're having to take on too many responsibilities.
Counterintelligence.
Yeah.
That to me was the frustrating thing of last year. I thought that's what Larry Fedora was supposed to do, was help self-scout.
That's what the analyst roles are
They
for.
said a lot of those analysts. I don't know what
Texas was not a good, and I don't want to dump on 2019 too much, but because we've been down that well and beaten that horse to death. But it goes back to like what we talked about. Like, did you waste the offseason? And I think, Rod, to their credit, I don't think Texas is wasting this offseason, even right now, where at least the playing field is a level, like nobody can meet on their campus or whatever.
Sure.
But in the virtual meetings, like that's all Mike Yurcich can do right now is self-scout.
Yeah.
He has literally nothing else to do.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It can only be good. Hopefully we're right, and that's where we were really deficient last year, because it could really, coronavirus is the perfect thing to go and counter that.
Yeah, no, his the word on the street is that he is a film junkie. I know a lot of people throw that around. Like, oh, man, he's a film rat. And like, no, this guy loves to get into a deep, dark hole for a few hours and just go rabbit
like Brandon Jones, it sounds like.
Yeah, just go rabbit holing. So hopefully that is the case. Because I think Tom Herman needs a few of those guys. You know what I mean? They're just rabbit hole guys. And those are the guys that will find that little thread, that little tiny thread that some team could pull on, and the whole damn thing unravels. He's the guy that'll find.
Well, and
it.
that was
You know what, man? If they do this consistently, if they're running twists, we're screwed. Somebody should have found that. You know what I mean? It happened early in that West Virginia game. Everybody was like, damn, West Virginia running them twists against Texas. They're running them pretty damn good. And then Oklahoma. And we seen it in LSU a little bit in LSU. It was like a few times LSU did it. And we're like, damn, Texas didn't pick that up. Oh, well. Then it happened in West Virginia. We were like,
continuing.
All right, well, okay, so it might be a trend here. And then Oklahoma was like, no, they cannot block the twist, the stunts. They cannot. Let's do it over and over and over again until they stop it. And somebody at Texas should have known that. Yeah. And they should have had that ready to go, and they did not have that. They were surprised by it. And it's like, well, it's been on film. We talked about it on the Longhorn Blitz podcast a couple of times. It's on film. Yeah. So I don't act like you ain't seen it, because I seen it.
Well, and then when you ever have that just go and hit it, it's almost like the offensive coordinator's mentality that, no, wait, they aren't stopping it. Just go and do it every single day.
Like, we're not executing. It's like, well, okay. But don't assume you're going to start executing. Assume the worst, that you'll never fix it. And then now schematically put in ways to fix it.
And that's exactly where we sort of wanted to see, like, say, that's what you thought Herman was going to be, being this Mensa guy that came in, was what aspiring Texas fans wanted to be. And then, like, you see something like a Lincoln Riley head coach, probably a type of guy that is able to be that offensive angle to give perspective to your defense that only can complement it. And it's sort of funny that when we had Herman hired the Mensa type thing, we were like, oh man, this is going to guy that's an aspiring, like, football philosopher. Like, he's going to be a guy that's deep in the film room, everything about it. And it's almost like he was an aspiring meathead and football player and loves the physicality of the locker room and the power. And there's nothing wrong with that. But they're the marrying of the two. And it was something that I think Texas fans overvalued one side because you saw almost had this, at least in my vision, was a mad scientist, offensive coordinator, the guy that's going to bring all these things that we're talking about and could be a great self-scouter and be the ones, and still is.
I think he is.
And then that's where the thing is.
But when you got to add head coach into the mix, which is a huge factor.
Exactly.
It changes everything.
Exactly.
Yes, he was all those things.
Which is why
but
your
sit
is so exactly.
And then, yes, he was a head coach, but he wasn't. And then he had Major, by the way, but he wasn't a head coach at Texas.
Yeah.
And then so all these, like we said, the cocktail is so fragile. Yeah. You remove one element, you remove Major, and Major's not that great of an offensive mind, but with Tom Herman, soulmates, baby. They work perfectly. And the same thing for Tom Herman as an offensive mind at Ohio State. It was great the way he won the national title, or at least was able to manufacture that offense on a third string quarterback. And that's because he changed the offense. They were muses for him, right? He was like, I got Cordell Jones. Watch this power quarterback.
I ain't seen anything like this.
You know what I mean? Exactly. And he can, and all those things work. But man, when you change it and you become the head coach at Texas and you also have to call the plays, and we would assume he's just going to do what he did at Ohio State, and we'll get him as the young, brash, nice, cocky head coach. No, because one thing affects the other.
Yep, 100%.
The major factor, I think, was, and like you said, it's not that Major's like a great, brilliant play caller, but it's the trust factor, Rod. And I think in that first year, it was pretty obvious the trust factor between Tom Herman and Tim Beckles. Otherwise, Tom Herman wouldn't have taken over play calling duties for the bowl game. And when you, from that point of it, look, I'm like this. There's certain head coaches that call their own plays. Right? Lincoln Riley does it. Jimbo Fisher does it. Yeah. If you're going to do it, great. But man, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, don't go down that road. That's what we said when everyone's like, Tom Herman's calling the plays, great. Yeah, but if that goes wrong, then I think you suffer from what I think Tom Herman suffered from last year, which I think it's a lot of paralysis by analysis. I think you're just staring at the problem so long. Maybe at times you're just overthinking it. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think it's good for him. I think you'll see Tom Herman have more clarity on offense now that he's kind of pulled back a little bit. He's not so deep in the weeds.
And doesn't have so much on his plate.
Yeah, and I've said this,
totally agree.
He's clearly got trust in Mike Yurcich. I think special teams is going to be better. Yeah. Because that's part of Tom Herman's background. That's in his wheelhouse.
And you brought up in the Major aspect and them two working so well together, and you were talking about cover bands earlier, and it's just sort of another analogy. Could be like a guitarist. There's millions of great drummers or bassists. There's millions of great guitarists. But they can try to get together and it doesn't work. But you can have that one guy that you've been with forever that you came up with and it aligns and you're good and you don't have to worry about it and just come
and the sound,
catch
you can
it right back up. And it's an environment and it's the same type of thing. It's chemistry and coaches can have that same thing. We just don't get to hear the output. We see the players on the field.
I think that's a huge part of it. I think that's a huge part of it. And like I said, now that he's hired Mike Yurcich, a guy that he clearly trusts, I think now he can take a step back a little bit and he's going from having to diagnose and resolve the problem, Rod, to where it's like, okay, I see these guys might be stuck on this a little bit. Let me go in and help.
Yeah. No, he's that, he was the overbearing, overprotective, overzealous parent who didn't trust their child. You know what I mean?
There you go.
That's always a problem. You guys obviously are parents. I am not, but we know that's a problem. You know, at one point, and your kids are probably not there yet, you have to trust the product, trust the upbringing, trust the foundation you build. And I think Tom Herman started to doubt that. All the way from the Tim Beck stuff, all the way through him calling the plays, and ultimately to him now having to hire someone else to help him with his kids.
Because it causes you to second guess yourself.
Help me raise my damn kids right now because I can't raise these damn kids.
I thought I instilled these things.
He was raising this child, this pro-spread child, and developing it, and he hit a roadblock. Something happened, and he needs somebody else to come in and help him raise this child. And I think he had gotten to the point where he didn't trust that child. And he had become an overprotective parent, and I think it led to him he had become paralyzed, as you pointed out, in his analysis and his prognosis and diagnosis of the offense. And because he didn't have, you know what I mean? Like he couldn't see the forest for the trees.
Hey, great writers get writer's block.
Yeah, you know,
Yep,
it's the
same
same
idea.
thing.
It
Yeah.
happens.
Same thing.
Not every director in Hollywood that's won an Oscar, and not every movie they've made has been great.
Come on now.
Almost all of them will
everybody-
say they
but-
made a horrible one.
But this is part of the deal too, Rod. I think Tom Herman deserves credit for this. He's still very young in his tenure as a head coach, period.
Yes.
So to be able to recognize the problem and realize, you know what, I need to get out of the offensive meeting room. I need to turn it over to somebody I trust.
Yeah.
I need to be more involved in
That's
special teams.
self-aware.
I need to reconnect with my players. All the things he's talked about. He talked about,
I agree.
I wrote the article from his interview with Bucky and Aaron about what he learned from his meeting with Brian Kelly. I do need to do all these things. The program will be better for it. I want to talk about the spring game. We mentioned this in our roundtable at Horns 24/7. The spring game would have been Saturday. What were you looking forward to the most? You guys know, anytime we go spring game, I want to look at line of scrimmage just in terms of personnel to see what's there. Though, and we talked about Derek Kerstetter and Malcolm Roach earlier, who's going to replace or Zach Shackelford and Malcolm Roach, who's replacing those guys. Kerstetter at center. You know, the interesting thing with the offensive line, Rod, it's weird how all this works out. Like if it was business as usual and Denzel Okafor went into the portal when he did, he probably doesn't come out. He probably keeps his name in the portal and goes elsewhere.
If not for the COVID crisis?
So COVID might have helped you retain Denzel Okafor. I don't know.
Yeah, can't go visit.
No,
other
you're definitely
schools.
right. I mean, it's just it's nowhere to go.
Right.
The portal leads to nowhere.
Yeah,
Why would you get into the portal when it leads to nowhere?
Unless it's just like an unhealthy situation.
Yeah.
Or,
Listen,
you're not jiving with
and
the
if
coach.
I've
gonna
dated
go-
women who've been portals to nowhere. I've entered that portal a couple of times.
Look, man, we've all been there, Rod. We've all
Yeah,
been there.
and then think if you were going to go, not only have that, but go live with one in another city you've never been
Yeah.
to, like that.
Yeah.
Those elements. too.
No, but I'm with you. Because in the spring we look forward to finally, because the skill guys are working out all the time. So in the spring game, I would have wanted to see D-line, O-line. Skill guy. Hell, you probably wouldn't have seen Sam for, I don't know, a damn series. And I don't need to see Sam.
No.
I don't even need to see Sam. Matter of fact, you can just leave Sam out of the mix if you want to. But I understand some people want to see his chemistry with the receivers. If that is possible, I want to see that second. Does he have somebody that, other than Brandon Eagles that
Smith
you throw to,
yeah,
Smith,
exactly.
and how they use Jordan Whittington.
Well, and those
Jake
would be
Smith.
the things. It's always the sort of just the fancy stuff on the outside that can get your attention. But Whittington, Smith, how the running backs would work together, how the rotation would use, or just what formation, more things like that to see what could be in. But then you realize it's spring game. This isn't even going to necessarily be telling. But it would have been just cool to see the skill guys out there.
We don't even know what technique they play and leverage they play, and for the corners, are they gonna play bump and run the entire time? Are they gonna bail? I would have been interested to see that, just that little stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know they wouldn't reveal too much, as Matt says, but they'd have revealed at least the technique they're gonna play.
Yep.
I would have. The other thing I would have wanted to see, other than the line of scrimmage, I would have wanted to see with 14 practices, how close could Hudson Card have come to making that backup quarterback battle an actual battle? Like, not that we would have been able to have a definitive answer, but
like that.
Rod, we've come out. There's been quarterback battles where we've come out of the spring going, "Oh no, that guy's got a chance," or that guy doesn't have it. I hope they got a plan B.
Yeah, that's the world of street is that Hudson Card is going to make that kind of leap and surpass Casey Thompson. Whoever the backup's going to be. I know Casey's the backup now and become the backup quarterback. I know there's other different options.
I don't see how it happens now. Depending on when they get back on the field and when
I
games
don't
are
know.
played.
I agree with you. It can happen now.
Yeah.
You can't even go there. I heard people talking about the NFL is going to have a hard time starting rookies because usually they draft the rookie quarterback in the first round, fly them up there the next night. Like, hey, let's start getting this playbook. Let's do it. Like, what the hell? I can send you the playbook, but I'd love to explain it to you.
Get in some virtual
I guess
football.
your virtual stuff.
I don't
It's
know.
just weird. You know what I mean? Usually you want to be out there with the quarterback as he's throwing.
Somebody has some
this is how we're going to throw this 6 route. You see, I want you to put it on his back shoulder. You know what I mean? All those little subtleties, none of that stuff.
Whichever
you're gonna miss all that.
has the best virtual reality, like tech nerds. There's one team that's like the Mark Cuban tech team
Somebody's
of the
got
NBA. I don't know who is that in the NFL, but somebody's got to invent some simulator the way.
They've already done that.
Well,
They got
then that's how they're doing
simulators.
it. Well, then you're
they
gonna
got
have the whole
those
team
already.
together.
They do.
But right now, remotely.
But do
from
you
one
have
another.
at your house? Yeah, now that's
what
gonna
I'm
be a
talking
new
about.
thing. That's gonna be the big boom. Yeah, virtual practice at the house.
Oh, right. No, but we're
He's got
practicing.
it needs a room, and you can kind of basically play the virtual game.
They remind me of seeing that
Nice.
video of Joe Smith, the pitcher, like trying to go throw in his backyard and just
When he
breaks his
broke the
window.
window.
Yeah,
Trying to
virtual
practice a new
reality,
pitch,
just throwing
and his
stuff
wife's
with the
like,
mask on.
"Was that you, honey?" He's like, Sorry, babe, I was practicing a new pitch.
Yep.
It's like, okay.
Or you could be as lucky as Sam Ellinger is to have your brother be in quarantine with you and he's a walk-on. He can just be like, Jake, come out here and get this work.
There you go.
I need to get some throws in.
So get some throws. Oh man, he's probably tired of throwing with Burrow. I guarantee he's tired of throwing with Big Bro because quarterbacks want to throw like 4 times a day.
Well, and with Big Bro,
like, before they brush their teeth and then they get a good throw in. And so like it's at these random like hour-long throwing sessions where they're just like, all right, man, go over here and run like you're running out. And I'm like, bro, I don't want to throw with you anymore. I'm tired of being your test dummy.
And not only is he a big brother,
I live
but
with
he's
a quarterback,
also...
so I remember these sessions. Like, and I was like, I can't even catch. You want to go throw with me? He's like, yeah, man, I just need to target something.
And then you also have a big brother. So then you go through there, like you have a big brother aspect and a quarterback. Like that's double down.
Oh, you got to do it for the team.
Before we get out of here, I want to read this story. A good friend of the show, Mark Henry. I haven't had Mark on in a while, but I think once things get back to normal, we'll have Mark be a part of the show again. And Mark does a fantastic show on Sirius XM Radio, Busted Open, where they talk about the world of pro wrestling. But, Rod, The Last Dance premiered on ESPN last week, and everybody's going back to those 90s Bulls teams. Mark Henry recalled his first and one of his only encounters with Michael Jordan. And I just want to read this story real quick. It was at the 96 Olympics, and Michael Jordan didn't play in the Olympics, but he was at the hotel. And Mark said at the time he was good friends with
the Iverson story.
He was good friends with Charles Barkley and David Robinson, and I think Karl Malone. So he was friends with a couple guys on there. And this is Mark telling the story. As we're in the lobby, Michael walks up. It's not, hey guys, how are you doing? It's, who are you? I said, who the blank are you? And that was the introduction. And Mark was let us say, it didn't matter. It was the principle. You don't walk up to Mark Henry and talk to me like I was some kind of peon. I was somebody in the world. Maybe I didn't make the money you made. People don't know my name. I don't sell $1 billion in shoes. But I'm Mark Henry. And if I wanted to snuff your lights out, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Wow.
It's identical to whenever Rod and I were doing the Sports Buffet, Mark Henry came on and talked about his only interaction with Allen Iverson. It was the same thing that Mark Henry went to put his hand out to Allen Iverson, and Allen Iverson thought he was a security guard. Like, why are you coming to shake my hand? And he told me something along the lines that, little man, I could end your world right now. And told him to shake it. I'm Mark Henry, the world's strongest man. And
so Charles Barkley smoothed it over, but I love this part of the story from Mark. It says, I looked at him like I was going to snap my fingers, and it was going to be like Thanos, and he would disappear. I put him in his place.
I bet he did. No, you don't mess with Mark Henry. He was bigger then too. He's lost like 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Well, I love that Mark Henry is like the checks and balances on. Even if you're the most famous badass dude in the world, you don't treat another human bad, or Mark Henry is going to treat you the way you want to be treated.
Of the people in my life that I've met, that I've had face-to-face interactions with, Mark Henry is at the very top of the list of people I would not want to piss off.
He's also a very nice man.
Sweetheart of a human being. But man, I don't ever want to see angry Mark Henry.
I remember him showing up to a Super Bowl party at a previous radio station where the previous radio station had no idea that they told him to show up, and they had no place for Mark Henry. And he ended up leaving the place to go find a different place to watch the Super Bowl. I was like, hey, y'all might have just angered the world's strongest man.
And that's why we're all over here now.
Yeah, there you go.
Not the reason, but you guys get the point. All right, Matt, thanks for everything, man.
You're more than welcome.
Rod B, appreciate the time and the knowledge.
Anytime, brother. Anytime.
For Matt, for Rod, for everybody at the Austin Radio Network and the Horn, 1049, 1019 AM 1260, streaming on the Horn app and at hornfm.com. You can get Rod B on the triple option each and every afternoon from 3 to 7.
Shameless plug.
You can also get me and Craig White each and every day on Light the Tower from 10 to noon. And thanks to Matt, you can get all of our archives, our classic interviews on the Longhorn Blitz SoundCloud page.
Yep, just type in Longhorn Blitz.
Don't forget to search Horns 24/7 Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. Search Horns 24/7 Podcast. You get us, State of Recruiting, and the flagship just by searching Horns 24/7 Podcast. For the Horn family, for the Horns 24/7 family, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for downloading and listening, and we will catch you again on the next episode.
You've been listening to Longhorn Blitz with horns247.com. Remember, for the latest Longhorn news 24/7, visit horns247.com.